Anytime, okay. So, I just like to, you probably know this, but I just want to bring it to the front of your awareness. Anytime you're trying to find out, well, what happens? You know, what's going on? You know, you have a child, a couple children, you're in another room, something smashes, you go, well, what happened, right? You're probably never going to find out the truth of what happened, but you might be able to piece together what happened. So history is like that. It's like a puzzle piece, but you know how you usually get it in a box? No, you have to go out and find those pieces and then try and figure out from those things what actually happened. And you can never do it. You must have, how many people have seen that there's books about the death of Kennedy? Every time there's a brand new guy who killed him, you know, there's somebody else killed him. Same with Jack the Ripper. Oh no, it was this guy, it was this guy. You never really know. So what I'm doing today is telling you, based on the puzzle pieces I've been able to find, who did what to who and where they did it. And it wasn't Colonel Mustard. Okay, I just want to quickly explain that I'm talking about Mamamaroneck during the Battle of Heathcote Hill. I'm not really going into the causes and the course of the American Revolution. I'm not qualified to do that. I'm barely qualified to do this. All right? And the second thing is, I put some pictures in because, you know, you can only take so much of this. And they're meant to be evocative. Oh yeah, this is sort of, that gives you the feeling of the time. They're not meant to be instructive. So this is, hey, that's not what the 5th Regiment wore, and you're right, yeah. But it's just to give you the feel of it, okay, as we go along to develop the story. I'm like the television guy. It don't matter as long as they've got nice uniforms and swords and stuff, right? Okay, so it's just to give you that feeling. So where do we start? We start in Mamamaroneck in April 2nd, 1776. It's a town meeting. Our town meetings were always in April, okay? We're having another town meeting. Probably not this schoolhouse, that's the 1816 one, but the 1730 schoolhouse, which was around. They'd meet in it, and they'd talk about various things, and they'd elect the officers, who's going to be supervisor, who's in charge of impounding things, stuff like that. And one of the things they talked about was who's going to fix the roads. And the roads were in such disrepair that they were saying, okay, Steve, you'll do this section. You have to give us at least 2 days. Tony, I want you to do the next section, at least 2 days of your labor, of your time working on these roads. And I wanted to highlight that because that becomes a little bit useful to know as you're going along. It's like a little bit of the puzzle piece. Things changed by late summer, okay? One of the people who lived here, his name was William Lounsbury. He was a weaver. Sometimes he was an officer of the town. He had various jobs with them, constable, I think, at one point in this. And he was also a loyalist. And he saw what was going on, and he said, you know, I got to help out the government because really this is ridiculous. So he became a recruiter of loyalists for a militia to fight for king and country type thing, which was quite popular in England, not as much so here. And he was in Mamamaroneck in August, and he's got about 14 people with him, when the American militia found out, and they came chasing after him, and they were shooting and stuff like this, and he's running this way and they're running that way, and one fellow decides, I'm getting him. His name was John Flood. He was a lieutenant in the American militia, and he lived just down the street, so to speak, from William. He was the boatman, so what his job was if you had to sell any goods in the city or anything, you take a boat. You don't try and go on the roads, because they were terrible, right? That's why we're trying to fix them. And he sort of got fooled by William. He says, I want to do some shopping, you know, get the wife a new dress, you know, frog's neck. So he takes him there, and William buys all these files, you know, those little files that you file stuff with, and he brings them back. What's his name? John has no idea. It's just doing his thing. And then he takes those files and he goes to Kingsbridge, and he shoves them in all the cannons that the Continentals have gathered in Kingsbridge, so they're no good because he spiked the cannons. Yeah. And then later on, they're like, wait, weren't you the guy who transported them? So John did not like him. cornered him. Tradition says in the cave. We know it was in the Great Lots, but we don't know if it was actually in the cave. I haven't found documentation of that yet. He had no bullets left, so he was fighting him off with, this is William fighting him off with this thing, and he was bayoneted to death. Now, the reason this is important, it's kind of interesting that it's the first blood shed in Westchester County in the Revolution. But more importantly, they found on him 2 papers. One said that Robert Rogers was forming a militia of Rangers, and the other one said Lounsbury is allowed to get people. So what they do is they say, look, if you can go out and you can get like 20 guys, I'll make you the lieutenant of those 20 guys. You get to do this thing. And this was told to Washington, and this was the moment that George Washington knew for sure that Robert Rogers was definitely working for the crown and raising a militia. Why should this be a particular worry? Because he was a famous Indian fighter, and in the French-Indian War, his guys were they're like a guerrilla force. They were the Rangers. They were able to out-Indian the Indian stuff, and they'd like do all sorts of ninja type stuff in the wilderness and survive cold weather and all sorts of things, and help them beat the French, who had a lot of Indians on their side. And I want a bad choice on the part of the Indians, but you know, those French, they talk like this, you know, can't resist that. And the Governor Trumbull of Connecticut was like, well, wait, if this guy's active, he knows every port and every inlet all up and down Connecticut. He's going to take us out. He's going to destroy all our things. So Rogers was seen as a threat. Now, little spoiler, poor old Roger was an alcoholic, had been for a long time. He was heavily in debt. He was really just trying to find some way to make money to pay off his debts, partially because his men, when he was a ranger, bought their own stuff, and he, as their leader, is supposed to pay for that by getting funds from the government, and they hadn't given it any. So yeah, so it was a big deal that they found this out. He was a threat, and partially just because of his reputation, you know. It's like Zorro at 67, 80 years old or something. I'm Zorro. And they said, oh, Zorro. He's 80 years old. I'm Zorro. You know, but it's the name, right? That's very, very powerful. By the way, Flood got rewarded for that. Congress gave him $20. Good job, you killed him. Good work. Here's $20. Just a little jump into the future here. John Flood, after the Revolution, left Mamamaroneck and moved out of the area. I guess there's still all loyalists left. And he moved to Portchester. A very nice house. He had a little house there. Had a daughter. I believe she went mad, according to the stories I've heard, and killed herself. And the house was still there in the 1800s and was considered haunted. Yeah, right? Yeah, that'll show them, right? Yeah, all right. Okay, moving on. Okay, Washington versus New York City. Yeah. So the English, who had sort of left Boston, and they're like, let's get out of here, and they went to Nova Scotia, which is, how many people have been to Nova Scotia? It's really nice, right? Yeah. So he was there for a while, getting more troops, and back to Long Island, and he takes over New York City. They made a pretty good stand at what was a place called the Harlem Heights, because the hills were such that it was fairly easy to defend. So he says, I've only got one army, right? This is it. If I lose this army, game's over. So he's taking this strategic retreat, and he takes them to this little hamlet called White Plains. Part of why he does that is because there's a lot of stores there. You know, they have a lot of their stuff. And part of it is because they also have a series of hills, so he figures we could make a pretty good stand here. It's worth doing. So Hal goes after him, of course. So before he's left Harlem, he says, I know, we'll land at Frog's Neck, and we'll go around, and now we got him. Pincer movement, right? We got him. But unfortunately, he couldn't really do a good job of getting off on Frog's Point because the Continental forces were just too much. They weren't a lot, but they were very effective in keeping him pinned down. So he said, you know what, I don't have to get off at this bus stop. I'll just go up to Pell's Point and keep fighting, and go up here. So he was landing there. he used New Rochelle as his base, and he was waiting for his troops, like 10,000 troops, ones that marched like this, and then the Hessians who swore in German and stuff. So the Hessians were, I guess you'd call them a mercenary group. It's like this guy who's the Prince of Hesse, which was like a German country. And he's like, yeah, who, you want some guys? I got some guys for you. Yeah, I'll send them to you. It'll be this much money. And then they go there, well, I don't know, just start stopping people, right? So they came over here from that. And they were really well trained, and some of them were really good shooting with certain weapons and stuff. So they were great help. Sort of makes it a world war, really. You got the Germans there, the French came and helped, the Spanish were there. I don't know that they were a lot of help, but they were there, So there we go. So now his idea is, I'm going to pursue him, White Plains. He seems to be settling down for the night, this fellow George, and we'll take him out, and it'll be great, and that'll be the end of the war. But he takes his time. He's a noble, so a little relaxed and stuff. And what he does, now we're down to the 20th, so now we'll do it by days of the week. Sunday night, he tells Rogers, I want you guys to go and capture Mamamaroneck and stores or destroy them that the Continental Army has put around Mamamaroneck, because that'll be great. And I'm also a little concerned that they're in Rye in Connecticut, and they're in Harrison, and they're in White Plains. I'm in New Rochelle, but they might come around here and kick me in the behind. And so he says, you're protecting that area, Rogers said about 400 men. One historian felt it was 300. I think he made a mistake. Another one said 500. I think he was a little biased, but generally the 400 is the number. And they didn't have any uniforms. They like signed up, I don't need to belong, right? And they just said, okay, come on. They didn't have any uniforms. They didn't have any money for uniforms yet. So when you see any depiction of them with these great green uniforms and that, no, they didn't have that. That was later on. I forgot to tell you. So this is how cool and how important and how powerful Robert Rogers was. He had a little set of rules. Rogers' Rules for Rangers is still used today, modified form, by the American Rangers, the Army Rangers. He was that good at doing it. And another interesting thing about him was when he was in Long Island, they just found in the last few years some evidence suggesting that he was the one who busted the undercover agent, Nathan Hale. You heard, I regret that I only had one life to live, but you didn't hear that the British officer says, we regret it too. We'd like to hang you 2, 3, 4 times. We're really annoyed. And you didn't know that? Okay. So there he is. And a quote here is, what Rogers ended up with were farmers, townspeople who scarcely knew one end of a gun from another, and few had any experience as soldiers. Okay. So he's going to be attacking Monday morning. Meanwhile, in Mamamaroneck, at this very time, is Colonel Carpenter's Bristol Regiment from Massachusetts, and they're on that smooth hill overlooking the bay. Right? This is here, right? And their purpose is on the Bay of Mamamaroneck in order to protect the stores, assist in repairing the roads. This is the Major General who told them to go, and prevent any communication between disaffected inhabitants and the enemy. The problem is, people living here in Mamamaroneck side by side, some were loyalists and some were patriots, and you don't want the loyalists talking to the British government. You don't want them helping them out at all. So it was an awkward thing. Then here's something that I don't fully understand. But on Monday morning, Washington sends a letter to Zebdiel Rogers. Coincidence? I don't think they're related. Yeah, that's my cousin. Of the 20th Connecticut militia, he's in Rye, to go and reinforce Carpenter. Carpenter's got 130 people, and he's got 170, roughly, so 300 together. But he said, sir, you're hereby requested to make the best stand you can with the troops under your command against the enemy, who I am informed are advancing this morning, Monday morning, on Mamamaroneck. I don't know where you get this information from. And I will, as soon as possible, order a party to attack them in flank, of which you shall be fully informed at the proper time. So you got 300 guys there, you got 400 guys coming to meet them and to chase them out and to battle with them for the stores of Mamamaroneck. Who's going to own Mamamaroneck? Which team's going to win, right? Actually, there was a few more people with Rogers. There was a detachment of Hessian guys, you know, but you can't understand what they're saying anyway. So, and they were just like, "We will get involved if you need us." So they were there. Now, we don't know how many are there. Now we come to a point which is contestable. Most of the stories or historians talking about this says that after he came out of the scene with sorry, after he got to Mamamaroneck, he chased off or attacked the militia and the companies and chased them off. I don't think that happened. I got a couple reasons for it. One is, there doesn't seem to be anybody who remembers fighting in the morning. And in fact, the school was in session. And you would think if there was a big battle in the morning for Mamamaroneck, right, on the street or something, that the people would be like, well, you know, okay, you can go home. Let me give you some homework, though, right? No. And then you have the Hessian adjutant. Adjutant just means he's an officer. He says that the Patriot militia did not await their arrival, the Rogers, but they abandoned their weapons before they even got there. That's what he claimed. And Washington, when he found out, he says, our people shamefully deserted on their approach. So there was no battle there. There was no fighting. Not for want of numbers. They had enough guys. Not bad. You're on the hill. You got the position. But for want of a good officer to lead the men. And yes, so you have both things. You have sometimes the soldiers are all like, well, you know, time's up. I'd rather go home now. I've finished war fighting and stuff. And sometimes it's the officers who says, no, I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. Because they're not necessarily the best. So moving quickly, the Rangers take possession of great quantities of Continental Army provisions. They go up and down Mamamaroneck Avenue in barns and houses and that. And what they're principally taking is rum. Well, yes, we got our priorities too. And you check any list, and they did rum, you know, molasses, which, by the way, you make rum from. I don't know that's why, but flour and pork, right? And as a matter of fact, the cool thing is that Mike Tripico has one of the receipts for a casket of rum. He's that old. He has a receipt for a casket of rum. There it is. White Plains, the 19th of October. He managed to get it before it was taken. 1776, a receipt from the Continental store at Mamamaroneck. One cask of rum. How was that anyway? It was very good. And that's the back of the item.
Still have some.
So the thing is, so they ended up destroying those provisions. They didn't keep them and say, okay, let's ship them back to the fort, the camp at New Rochelle, because they couldn't get any wagons. Nobody had a wagon available. The rental was totally out of these wagons. And this too is an important thing for you to know and to hold in the back of your mind, that there were no wagons they could commandeer, you know, to move the provisions back. Plus, they didn't know how many people they were facing with the militias, because they run away. But you don't know, they might be regrouping, turning around. You know, you have an officer who says, hey, what's going on? Let's go get them. And if they were coming back, so they just destroyed them, which was sort of okay, because Howe said capture or destroy, so they did what they're supposed to do. Okay, so they destroyed the stuff. Now, he needs to settle them down, so they go up to Heathcote Hill. They go, okay, the Delancey house, when, I think it was E.F. Delancey was writing about this in 1886, the Delancey house was still here. But it wasn't actually here. It's closer to the edge of the brim there. But anyway, the Oriental Gardens are this way to across the street where the ridge is. And there was this guy named McDonald. Before he did his franchise with the hamburgers and that, in the 1840s, he went around bothering old people and asking them, do you remember anything from the Revolution? And he copied down all of their personal remembrances, which is kind of amazing. In the rear of what is now known as Delancey House, the Women's Club say, the station thus selected was memorable in the recollection of the aged. It was the spot which formed part of the ornamental garden. So that's how come we know what it was. after the 1830s or 40s, Suzanne Delancey, who was living here, talks about going to the Delancey burying ground, and you go through the gardens, used to be ornamental gardens, and up the hill, and through the orchards, and there you are at the place. So he settled them down here. They got really close to the ledge because it's cold outside, right? It's October like now, but there was a huge wind going there, and they don't have any tents. So they were breaking apart. This isn't actually a picture of that, okay? But it does sort of evocative of it. Breaking apart fence rails to have little fires going and to go to sleep. And about 7 o'clock, the next thing he did when he got them settled in the afternoon, he went down to have a little headquarters for himself, the schoolhouse where they had those meetings, right? This is where the schoolhouse was. Oh, that's on it. That's actually worth looking at. So this is straight across the street, right? And neighbors right across the street. You see the start to rise there, and then you have that brick wall, but stone wall. But of course, they just did that so they'd have a parking spot up there. In actual fact, it would have continued along and up the hill that you could actually climb the ridge. It wasn't like this that we were doing like that. So it's that close. They could well be bodies buried there. In fact, there were. And this is where the schoolhouse was, Gillies Park. I don't know if you know this at all. So this road here is, oops, what did I do? Turned it off. This road here is the old post road, and Orienta is right here. And that's what that is. That's where the school was. It's so he takes possession of it. And there was one old guy that remembered him as this man with wild face and fiery eyes and stuff like that. Very rough-looking man with red eyes. He sent the kids home, which immediately made them loyalists. You see, this is the type of thing that happens. You know, a day off school, yay for the king. You know. This is the thing you got to watch out about. And okay. And then in the evening, he set up his sentry posts. There's no picture of. So what he did is he said, okay, we'll have a sentry around everywhere, but we'll put a bunch of guys near White Plains in case they come from White Plains. We'll put a bunch of guys near Rye because they might come from Connecticut and Rye, and near Harrison and that. We won't bother too much with putting men here because this is where the British Army is. So it's unlikely they go, hey, excuse me, we're just going to attack. He thought it was safe, so he didn't do that. When Washington in White Plains found out that Mamamaroneck was taken, he ordered Lord Stirling to retake Mamamaroneck and capture or kill Rogers. So there's an interesting thing, and I couldn't find it for this, but there's a point where Washington says in a letter something to the effect that, yeah, I'm there, but I don't organize things. I tell what I want done, and then Lord Stirling, he gets it done. He gets it done for me. He does the logistics. So speak to him about this. But I'll try and find that for when I. So a lot of times you'll read that Stirling was the one who ordered the attack. Well, he's the one who got it organized according to Tigman. Is that how you say his name? Colonel Tigman, the aide-de-camp. It's spelled so hard.
Tillman, yeah.
Okay. He says that it was Washington who detached Major Greene to fall upon Rogers in the night, which they did. I don't think he actually said, hey, Greene, come, I want you to do this. First of all, it was, anyway, but you get the idea. He's in charge. He wanted it captured, but he gives Stirling the job to actually do it. Okay, so what Stirling does, I don't understand how he gets to call himself Lord, right? He's an American, he's a republic. But anyway, he does. So what he does around 4 o'clock, he starts assembling a force of 600 men from Colonel Haslam's Delaware Blues. They dress really, really nice. I mean, these guys, they got the buff, and they don't actually look like that. It has the buff thing, and they're really dressed nice. Although some of the American forces had red coats on. I don't know, right? Didn't they get the rule book at the beginning? They flipped the coin, they said, you wear red, you'll wear, and march in a straight line, we hide behind the bushes and shoot at you. That was what they decided on. Didn't get the memo. But they were supplemented by, to make up the 600 riflemen from Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Hampshire. Interestingly enough, so there's elements of Colonel Smallwood's 1st Maryland Regiment. There was Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Broadhead's 1st Pennsylvania Rifle Squad, and then there was 8 New Hampshire militiamen. And this guy Peter Kimball writes, there was a detachment of about 600 men sent to engage the enemy at Mamamaroneck. 8 went out of our company. I mean, what did they had like 592 or something. We were 600, so I got 8 volunteers. But that's the way this often was. It's like a bunch of these guys and a bunch of those guys, and they put them all together and send them down. That was supplemented by 150 men from the 1st and the 3rd Virginia Infantry under Major Green. So it was the whole of the 1st and some of the 3rd. And here's where we have a new mystery. You ready? Okay? Just relax. Be calm. Deep breath. The future President James Monroe was a lieutenant in the 3rd Virginia Infantry. Was he in Mamamaroneck? Did he march down here? We don't know. He didn't fight. They didn't fight the 3rd Virginian in White Plains. I'm not sure why. But 2 days before, they attacked the British group and they killed like 56 of them. So they were definitely on things. So maybe. I should just mention, it's that guy with the circle, that's him, but he wasn't actually in the boat with Washington. He was already on shore, checking the place out, seeing where they could eat, stuff like that. And Washington probably wasn't standing up in the boat either, but it's a nice picture anyway.
And the flag wasn't created yet. It would be the old Grand Union Continental colors that early.
What we found is that somebody went back in time and gave him that, just for a photo op.
I heard about Franklin playing around with that.
Okay. Now, once Rogers had got his sentinels all put out, his outposts and everything was ready, he's ready, he goes to bed, right? Down in the schoolhouse. And somebody, several of them actually, who's local, who was able to go amongst the Rangers and everybody be like, oh, that's cool, yeah, hi, how you doing? And see where all the positions were, made note of that mentally, and as late as 9 o'clock at night, so that they said this is the status quo now, they rush up to White Plains and they told, but because Mamamaroneck had patriots too, we're all Americans and some were on one side, some on the other, so the other way of looking at it is, hey, these guys risked their lives to get the information about what the layout was. And they told Sterling the back door, the southwest, there's nobody, the southwest, there's nobody this way. One Indian guy, he's a kid. He's like, that's it, nothing there. It's great, you can do this. So that's what the plan was, the plan. But we don't know much about these people, but Sterling knew exactly where the sentinels were placed and was acquainted with whatever precautions against surprise they had taken. I don't know what the historian meant by that. What did they have, like booby traps? I don't know. But anyway, that's what it said. So he told the detachment exactly where to go. Now Rogers woke up and said, I don't feel quite well, not the bed bugs. And he went up there and he looked around again and he checked everything. And he said, maybe somebody would take a chance and sneak past the British camp and try and attack me from here. I know that's what I would have done back in the day. And so he put, between his sentinel, the Indian, and his camp, he put 60 men, Captain Eagle's 60 guys. Eagles was like a rough and tough guy, not very educated, but he had people, so he became a captain. And then he retired again to his place. So Lord Sterling does not know about these 60 guys. He didn't hear about them. He thinks his plan is still good. British Army is about 2 miles to the west. They marched down Weaver Street. They used the crossway. They came from White Plains. They came from the crossway down Weaver Street, past the Quaker Ridge, the Quaker school that was there, and they arrived to within half a mile of the highway from New York to Boston, which is approximately Myrtle Boulevard, just to give you sort of feel from it. So then what did Peter do? Peter gets out a map, and he says that they went in the field and they proceeded northeast. And if you draw a line from there straight to Heathcote Hill, it's a straight line. So as long as they had one of those things where the thing goes like this, as long as they had one of those, they didn't even need the guides, but they used them. And the guides sort of went ahead, and it says that they removed obstacles that would make a noise. I don't even get it. How do you remove stuff without making a noise so that the army won't make it? But apparently this is what, let's move everything. So I think they must have gone really, really slow. Anyway, they approached a lane, and they knew, well, that's what they went northeast towards Heathcote Hill. They knew that there was a sentry there because they had the information from the guides, but they couldn't see him. So they marched up and down. Colonel Green himself with his 150 Virginians, they left a few behind, and then Hazlitt's behind him with his 600 guys. So they went up and down until they found him, and then they sent a few guys to sneak up, and they jumped on him and they grabbed him before he could, yell out, and they tried to hold him, but he was a pretty good fighter, and they were afraid he was going to cause a ruckus in that, so they went. And that was the end of him. But at that point, the guides deserted them. We don't know why, but Green wasn't too worried because it's a straight line right here, straight ahead, keeping the northeast, and we'll land on these sleeping rangers, and we'll raise demons and hellfire and stuff, and they'll be so scared, it'll be great. Okay, so he wasn't that worried. I'll show you the. This is the map. So how did they get from Myrtle? So they go in a straight northeast line, takes you to Blossom Terrace, which as you probably know is sort of a high ground. They used to have the train station there way back in the day. Yeah. And so they would have wanted to stay on the high ground because you don't want to be crawling around here and looking up to see if anybody's looking at you. You're better up here and looking down. They didn't get as far as Walters, okay? They couldn't do that, it was closed anyway. But because you'll see, if you're in the back of Walters, that it's low there. The hill is just behind that, right? So they would cross the most likely places, the high school, because that's also high ground. They go to the high school. And the cool thing about the high school is how it drops away. So that's the ridge. And you follow that ridge, and even when you go on Carpenter Street, the ground drops away. And even when you get to the town center, how that's lower, that area, there's like a little soccer field or something there, that's lower. And they kept going until they came to a lane. And that would have been Rockland, which was a country lane at the time. And so it makes sense, following that straight line up there, that they got the sentry. Now this I just put in as a sort of the ridge, because all these houses on this side, the back of them, it drops down. All these houses on this side of Cortland, just across the street, it's the ridge behind them, so it makes sense that they put the guys there. Meanwhile, the Rangers themselves were below the ridge, napping. So there's Eagles. Now you see what happens. So they go, it's okay, we just go in a straight line, and we're going to land on top of these guys. So Green goes ahead with his Virginians, and they get to here, and suddenly they're standing on Rangers, and he's like, oh, I don't know why they're here, right? So he sends a message back to Hazlitt, we found them, we're there, we're here, we're early, but we're here. And they start fighting with them, and they say, surrender or die. And so some go, oh, surrender, like this, right? They make up their mind. Others start fighting them right away. Hewson, who was a lieutenant, and he was from Dutchess County, where he had lost his land because he'd been driven out as a loyalist. He says, it's something like, fire away, boys, never give up to the rebel. And then he fell dead because they said, hey, he's talking, and they all shot him, right? Now, what happens is really, really cool. This is so cool. So they're fighting them, but you have to understand, the Virginians, they were also dressed in ordinary clothes. They didn't get the nice blue uniforms that the Delaware Blues had. They had to wear their ordinary clothes. So you got the ordinary clothes Rangers, the ordinary clothes, and it's the middle of the night, early in the morning. They can't really tell. So after they stumbled upon them, they start fighting and shooting and stuff like that. Eagles yells out, "Surrender, you Tory dogs," to the Virginians. They're like, "Wait, what? What?" They start saying, "Yeah, we hate Rogers, get him." So the guys start pretending that they're actually Virginians. They're not. I don't know, they did the accent or whatever. And they start fighting among each other, and nobody knows who it is. They're even fighting each other. "You there, Tory? No, you're the Tory." And what they're doing, the whole time they're doing this, Hazlitt comes up and he surrounds them with his 600 men, but it's hard to tell who's who because they're all doing the thing. They're moving back the whole time up that road towards Heathcote Hill because they're trying to get, while they're fighting, trying to get closer to the main encampment. So they have the reinforcements of their own guys there, right? And that's what they're doing as they're going along. Very confusing. The Rangers on the hill are like waking up and like, "Hey, what's going on?" According to the reports, even though they were freaked out and didn't know who was attacking them and all this sort of stuff or what was going on, they still went to their positions on the hill and that. They knew enough to do that, but they were scared. They didn't know what was going on. They hear all this noise coming from there. Then all of a sudden, as they're on the hill, the Virginians and the Rangers, Eagles, Rangers are like, like this. So now they're really scared. They're like, "What is going on? This place is crazy." And everybody's fighting hand to hand. And the Rangers are pretty close to leaving, and just leaving the field and running away. Okay. This guy's representing Robert Rogers. Robert Rogers wouldn't be wearing that little cap. That was later, or earlier actually. And he didn't have a beard, and he had red hair. But other than that, this is from the show Turn. Did anybody see that show? Yeah, they sort of made it up as they went along, but it was kind of fun anyway. He's down in the schoolhouse, which, remember, is way, way down there. It's like Orienta. Now, I took my dog, Cagney, and we paced it from the schoolhouse to the bottom of Heathcote Hill. It's like 300 paces. It's a fair distance. He runs it. He's got his little gun. It's called a fusil. It's like a musket, but then they cut it off because it's really cool when you show up with one of those things. You can shoot like this. Only once, but. And then he runs up the hill, and he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know the disposition of troops or who's winning or who's losing. He knows nothing about that. But it doesn't really matter. He just says, "They're running. They're running. Give them hell, boys. They're running." Which makes his guys go, "Oh, wait, we're winning?" So they say, "Oh, okay. Okay, we're winning. Yeah, let's go." So they start running back, right? Meanwhile, the Virginians are going like, "What? Oh, are we losing? What are we losing?" So they're trying to back up, right, to get back to Hazlitt and his guys. Hazlitt is a little bit behind them because about 31 soldiers had given up. The Rangers had given up, and he had been securing those troops. And they had, how they put their guns like this? He got 60 rifles, muskets, right? And he got some blankets. I don't know why he wanted the blankets, but he wanted it. But anyway, then he's right there. He's now ready to join in the attack. So you got 600 of them. You got 150 Rangers. The Rangers are a little confused, but still, and their position's pretty good. They're on the top of the ridge there, so they're doing pretty good. So he charges. And then you hear the voice. It says, "The hoarse voice of the old Indian hunter was now heard above the din of battle. Steady, boys, steady." He's got them in a line, and they fire. Single volley, and then they just keep firing in that. That single fire was so impressive, because like a flame from the musket there, that in White Plains on Chatterton Hill, where General Heath was settling up things, they could see it. Like, what the heck is that? Anyway, they didn't hear it, but they could see it. And he sent someone to try and investigate and see what it was. So it was very impressive. Okay. Now, this is it's interesting. The Pennsylvania riflemen, they mistook the Delaware Blues for the enemy, and they started shooting at them. And the Delaware Blues started shooting back at the Pennsylvania riflemen. So he's got Castle's got Virginian guys who are running back to him saying, we're not really sure what's going on. He's got his own men being shot on by somebody, some force, and he's got a single line of riflemen, well, they weren't rifles, but shooting at him. So he figures that's it. This is not the situation I signed up for. I'm not sure what's going on here. He says, I'm better off leaving at this point. Just kidding. Get some sleep. See you in the morning. And off they went, back up with his prisoners, back up, that's it, Fenimore. It's not really Fenimore, but it's like Fenimore, right? Quietly, because they haven't disturbed the British camp 2 miles away. They still don't know. What's that noise? Nothing, have another drink. You got any rum? No, it's in Mamamaroneck. Yeah. Okay. This is now Tuesday. That was 4 o'clock Tuesday morning. This is now Tuesday, like 9 o'clock or something. And Hazlitt wrote that Lord Stirling was so highly pleased with our success that he thanked us publicly on parade. Half of the war is I hate to say propaganda, but half of the war is the propaganda, right? So they said, oh, at our first attack, Rogers skulked off into the woods. He was so scared. He wasn't even there, right? He came running out. But it's a lot about that. And they made a very big deal of this. Look, we got some blankets. We caught 71 men. So it's very important. It increased the morale of the military just before the Battle of White Plains. So you don't just fight by winning battles, you also fight by influencing minds. Very important. Okay, so it's sunrise now. It's Tuesday sunrise, and there's a bunch of bodies lying around, moaning and wounded. They buried them on the ridge where they fell. According to Nicholas Schofield, they buried the dead, but their graves were too shallow, and dogs kept digging up the bodies to eat. So they redug them and put heavy stones on them. There's another eyewitness account I got to share with you. It's so cool. So there's this kid in 1940. He was a kid at Mamamaroneck High School doing a project on these burial grounds, right? Now, he just died in 2020, Jupiter, Florida, because where do we go when we're old? We go to Florida, right? But, so he's an old guy. He just died. He was talking to Charles Baxter Sr. when he was a high school student, and Charles Baxter Sr. was an old guy. And he told him, when he was a little kid, when Charles was a little kid, he was talking to Edward Delancey, who was an old guy. And Edward Delancey said, when I was a little kid, I was talking to this old guy named Mr. Mott, and he told me that he was there at the battle. He was awakened one night by the sound of firing over near the Heathcote hill. He dressed hurriedly and ran towards the town. Sneaking carefully behind bushes and trees, he neared the scene and saw British redcoats fighting with American soldiers and townspeople. After the battle, the dead were buried in a common grave. Now, what did he actually see? What he saw as townspeople were all of the people who were dressed in ordinary clothes, right? Virginians, Rangers, and stuff like that. And of course, he saw the Delaware Blues dressed in their nice outfit. And he also saw British redcoats. You won't find any information about the British redcoats being in this battle. But we know, A, here's a guy who said he saw some. B, there was someone who said that of the soldiers that were taken to White Plains, he saw one British redcoat in the thing. And C, in 1904, when they were trying to subdivide this thing and they were digging on Monroe and digging for sewers and water lines, they found some buttons which came off British uniforms. So there were definitely some redcoats there. Because after all, it's not a party if there's not dressed up redcoats, So, remember I said they were having a problem with the ox carts and that? They couldn't find any to take away the provisions, so they had to destroy them. They had the same problem with the wounded. And it took them till the afternoon to do it. And one of the people wrote, the wounded remained for some time on the field, their moans from pains and their cries for waters most distressing to the locals. I guess it would be, huh? Where did they take him? They took him to a New Rochelle church. That's all it describes it as. My best guess is it's the Episcopalian church that's there now, Trinity St. Paul on Huguenot Street, because it existed before the war, and so it's likely that it was the place. But they were using it as a hospital. This is the totals: about 25 left dead on the hill, 31 captured by the Patriots, 28 imprisoned, 3 hung by Sterling at their camp in White Plains on hastily erected gallows. So Colonel Hazlitt said he got 36 prisoners. The very first American list has 31 names. The second American list has only 28 names. 3 people didn't make it. Howe's list, General Howe, was 28 missing Rangers. Rogers reported 19 Rangers killed, 1 subaltern, which again is a British officer, 8 men wounded, and 28 unaccounted for. And Tillman said, we don't know how many were killed, but an officer counted 25 in one orchard, and we had 12 wounded. And Lieutenant James McMichael of the Pennsylvania guys said, the enemy had 14 killed in the attack, but unfortunately taking the Delaware Blues for the enemy, we fired on each other, in which 6 of our riflemen and 9 of the Blues were killed. So it's from 19 to 29, so you have to figure out where it was. One Patriot soldier wrote in his diary on that day, Tuesday, there was a gallows ordered by General Sterling to hang 3 of the prisoners at 12 o'clock. Now this seems a bit rough, right? Why did he choose these 3 prisoners? Was he mean? And he said, 3 of you will die today. It turns out that the suggestion is they were deserters. So they were known to the Continental Forces because they were with the Continental Forces at some point, and then they switched sides, which happened a lot during the war. So that's why they were killed, because they were definitely turncoats, if you like. Okay. As soon as the prisoners arrived in White Plains, Washington sent them to Fishkill, the Congress in Fishkill, not the big Congress, but a Congress in Fishkill, to be dealt with as traitors. They ordered them to be put in chains, irons, and marched to Exeter Jail in New Hampshire. A long way. They were led through Litchfield in the chains on the 13th of November, according to the New York Gazette, and were treated in a very barbarous manner on their way to Exeter Jail. 2 of the people who were captured was Frederick DeVoe, a New Rochelle family. He has a lovely little house and a lovely farm, and they gave it to a guy who was a real pain in the neck. Thomas Paine, right? They tore down Paine tore down his place and built the new house, which is the house you see now. And then they moved the house. Don't you love how we move history around? It didn't actually happen here, but we cleaned the house and we figured it looks nicer here. And another guy was, 2 guys were John and James Angevin, who lived at 164 Mamamaroneck Road in Scarsdale. It's a rather nice house. This is it in 1904. Their father had got it in 1768, and kept it until 1858 when it was sold. So it was in the family a long time. And what does it look like today? Right? Yeah. Isn't that cool? Okay. There's no more town meeting after this. That was the last town meeting, April. Mamamaroneck became part of the lawless neutral ground with the Americans north or west, like in Connecticut and that, and the English sort of in New York, and the predators came in between, started stealing things and getting supplies for each side. But they were raving groups of marauders, and it was pretty horrible things. Burnt places down, raped, killed, stole. It was lawless until the war was over, and many families moved out, and just to be safe, some went behind the lines in New York City, some went behind the lines in Connecticut, depending upon their affiliation. But November 25th, 1783, Evacuation Day, the British left New York City, okay? And a month later, Mamamaroneck had their first election, right? Again, the new thing. And Gilbert Budd, remember, Lieutenant Colonel Sergeant Gilbert Budd, he became the supervisor and the town clerk, and there was another job he had because he didn't have a lot of people. And look at the problems they had: the roaming horses, sheep, geese, and fixing the road. They're still trying to fix that down the road. And that is the story of the Battle of Heathcote Hill. Thank you very much.